Hey guys, for Monday we're going to be doing page 509, numbers 7 through 24. So I thought I'd go through the odds, see if I couldn't help you guys out here. So this assignment has to do with the quadratic formula again, mostly. It's really just using the things we learned last week, but with a focus on the quadratic formula. So do you guys recall the quadratic formula? Here, hold on. All right, there it is. Negative b plus minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, where a, b, and c are the numbers in front of, for example, two would be your a, negative 3 is your b, 7 is your c. That would be an example. And you plug those numbers in up here, work it out. That gives you two answers for this equation. Normally, quadratic equations have two answers. So what we're doing, we're skipping 1 through 6. It's probably not going to be that helpful. So we're just going to jump straight into number 7. It says evaluate the discriminant, then select the choice of the best solution. Okay, what is the discriminant? Let me write that down. Okay, the discriminant, you guys the root word for this is discriminate, which means to tell the difference between, which is not necessarily an evil thing. So, discriminant is tell the difference between. In the quadratic formula, this thing under the square root kind of tells you what's going to happen to your final answer. I don't know if you guys remember from last week, but when you got for example, a 0 from this, you would always end up getting one answer for your equation. If you got normally you would get something positive, and they usually made it so it had a square root. Okay, in that case, we got two kind of normal answers. If we got something positive that didn't have a square root, like 47 or something, we would get two answers that were weird, like they'd have a square root in the answer. That's called that would be two irrational answers. And what we didn't touch on last week, but this is kind of new. If you get a negative under here, and if you try to take the square root of a negative, you'll get something doesn't work, and we're going to call that not real. So those are the four options. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac, that thing underneath the square root, underneath the radical. Okay, that's going to tell us, without solving the whole problem, that's going to tell us what kind of answers we will get. So that's what we're doing on the first part, on number 7. We're going to use this to figure out what kind of answers we would get if we were to actually do the whole problem without doing the whole problem. And so, okay, so our four options, I'm going to write these over here so we can refer back to these later. The first option I'll just call it has a square root. And that will give us, okay, if you get a normal number up here, it has a square root. 2. Okay, rational, you guys might have forgot, is just like anything that can look like a fraction or a whole number or a integer. So rational is like a normal answer basically. So if we get something that has a square root up here, we're going to get something with a normal, two rational answers, two normal answers. That's what happened last week, almost every time. I'll call this one doesn't have square root, and that would give us two weird answers, two irrational answers. Like the square root will still be in the answer if you don't change it to a decimal. So that's what happens when you get a weird number up. That would have been like the last couple problems on last week's. All right. Third option is if you get a 0. In that case, it's kind of rare, but you're only going to have one rational answer. And then the last case is if you get, there we go. Okay, the last case is if you get a negative. Which the examples from last week did not give us, but if you got a negative under the square root with this thing, it's not going to work. So that's no real answers. Okay. Let's see, is that how the book wrote it? It just says no real. Okay, so I'll just erase that, I guess. Okay, this might be a little bit confusing, but as we go through the examples, you'll kind of see how it works. It's really not bad. It's easier because you don't have to solve the whole problem. They're not asking us to on the first part anyway. Okay, so number 7. It says x squared plus 20x plus 51 equals 0. 20x plus 51, yep. Alright, so what we're going to start with is the same thing you were doing on the last assignment. And that is get the a, b, and c out, and then plug those a, b, and c's in, and then let's see what we get. Okay, so what is a, b, and c? A is 1, b is 20, c is 51. Okay, if I plug those in, let's, I'll write it over here again. Okay, if I plug that in, b squared, that would be like 1 squared minus 4 times, whoops, b squared is 20 squared. Minus 4 times a times c. Okay, let's see, work that out. 400 minus, I believe that's 204. 400 minus 204 would be 196. Okay, we got 196. So which of these is true? Does 196 have a square root? Does it not have a square root? Is it a 0? Is it 0? No. Is it negative? No. Okay, so it's one of these two. Does 196 have a square root? Okay, so you can plug that in your calculator. If you plug that in your calculator, you should get 14. Yeah, it has a square root. So what we would get if we were to actually do the whole problem and work out is we get two normal answers, which they're calling two rational answers. Okay, so the answer to number 7 would be, well, they want you to put 196, and then they want you to put what letter? A, the first option. Did I do it in the same order they did? Yeah, okay. So the first option is A. So that would be the answer to number 7. All right. See, not too much to it. Okay. Number 9. Number 9 says x squared minus 6x plus 9. So what's A, B, and C? 1, -6, and 9. That's my A, B, C. Okay, so here I go. Discriminant B squared, -6 squared, minus 4 times A times C. 4 times A times C. Okay, -6 squared is 36. What's 4 times 1 times 9? 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 9 is 36. 36 minus 36, 0. Okay. On number 3, if we get it says if we get a 0, we should get 1 normal answer for the whole thing if we were to work it out. So that would be, so our answer is 0 and 1 rational answer. That's option C. My 1, 2, 3, 4 here is like they're A, B, C, D. So anyway, that would be the answer to number 9. Okay, 11. All right. -3 plus 1 equals -8. Plus. All right. On this one, I keep going higher, don't I? Okay, on this one we got a problem. They don't have it written in standard form because there's no 0 over here. If you remember that trick from last week. So we need to move this over. So there's a 0 over here and everything's lined up so we know what A, B, and C are. So how do I get rid of -8? I add 8. So it's -3x squared plus x plus 8 equals 0. So now I can see my A, my B, and my C right there. Okay, now I'm going to plug those in. B squared would be 1 squared minus 4 times A times C. Whoops. All right. 1 squared is 1. 4 times -3 times 8. 4 times -3 is -12. Times 8 would be like -96. But if you're minusing -96, it's actually a plus 96. So that'd be 97. All right. So we get something positive. Does it have a square root? You plug it in calculator? No. There's no. 9 times 9 is 81. 10 times 10 is 100. There's nothing nice that will give us 97. So no square root. It's not 0. Okay, it's not negative. So it doesn't have a square root. So this is 2 irrational answers. So I'm just gonna, the answer would be 97 and B. All right, there it is. Okay, number 13. The reason we're writing down that number is because they say what is the discriminant, and that's basically the number that comes out from this. Usually when I think of discriminant, I think of this thing, but on that problem, I guess. Okay, anyways, that's just part of what they're asking for. Number 13, they don't do anything tricky to us on this one. let's see. So 2x squared plus 5x plus 1 equals 0. I just realized 13 is not going to be a D answer. It's not going to be negative. So let's see. I think I'm going to kind of cheat and do number 12 instead of 13, just so we see one of every kind. All right, number 12, x squared plus 2x equals negative 9. All right, again, this is number 12, not 13. So I did it again, didn't I? Need to back that. All right. So we got the same problem as the last time. They snuck a negative 9 on the right side. So we don't, our A, B, and C are not lined up correctly. So to get rid of negative 9 on this side, I need to plus 9. So I get x squared plus 2x plus 9 equals 0. So my A is 1, my B is 2, my C is 9. Okay, plug those in. B squared, 2 squared, minus 4 times A times C. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 1 is 4 times 9 is 36. What's 4 minus 36? Negative 32. All right, so that's our discriminant. And then what kind of answer are we going to get? Well, it's down here at the bottom. If we get a negative, it is not real. So we're going to put D, no real answer. Because, again, if you get a negative under a square root, if this turns into a negative, it's not going to work out. They can't, nothing times itself equals a negative. So the answer is it's not real. The end of that section. All right, number 15, it says solve. Okay, this is what we were doing last week. It doesn't tell us how to solve. So we got to choose x squared plus 12x minus 45 equals 0. I always forget. All right, we're supposed to choose the best method, the easiest method. I don't know if you guys recall from last week. Okay, there was 3 methods, and the first one was factoring. And by the way, we don't really need this anymore. I think I'm going to go ahead and erase it. You don't have to use a discriminant to solve it. Okay, the discriminant just tells you if you were to solve it, this is what kind of answers you'd get. Okay, so if you're actually solving it, we don't really need that stuff. So I'm going to erase that. And in its place, I'm going to talk about the 3 methods we learned last week. And the first one was factoring. The second one was, it's hard to say this in a way that's simple. It was where you get x squared by it only worked on some kinds of equations. You get x squared by itself and then you square root both sides. I'm just trying to think how I want to phrase that. Square root both sides. Yeah, it's not very technical. I'll do it anyway. Okay, factoring only works if it's factorable. Okay, if those, like on number 15, gosh darn it, every time. On number 15, you'd have to say, is it factorable? Well, you'd have to say, can two things go into negative 45 that add up to 12? If yes, it's factorable. We can use that method. Okay. Square roots. The square root method only works if you can isolate the square on one side. It doesn't work on all kinds of problems. I'll talk a little bit about that more. Number 3, the last method we learned was quadratic formula. Works on any kind of quadratic equation, function, whatever. Okay, so if you want to just say, I don't want to confuse myself, I'll just always do it one way. This is the only way that can get that for you. Okay, so these other two can make it easier if you get them, but if you want to like dumb it down, this works every time. This would be our last Wednesday assignment. Okay, quadratic formula is right there. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do, since they want you to choose what method to use, I think I'll try to do one of these, and then I'll just use this on the rest of them to kind of remind us, since this really overall is the most useful. Okay, so on number 15, I'm going to see if it's factorable. Okay, do two things go into negative 45? Remember, factoring looks like that. Okay, and then this equation over here, the equal 0, back when we were factoring, like right before the break, we didn't have equations, we just had this, and we did two parentheses. Okay, so this equation, just don't touch it. Just leave the equal 0 out of it. For the front, we said what goes into x squared? That's factoring. X times x. For the back, we said what goes into negative 45? That adds up to 12. Okay, this is where knowing your times tables helps a bunch. You can plug it in the calculator. What's 45 divided by 5? 9. Okay, so like 5 times negative 9 would go into that. Does that add up to 12? No. What else goes into 45? 1 in 45, that's not helpful. Okay, negative 45 is 3 times 15. Can we get 12 out of 3 and 15 if one of them is negative? Yes, we can. 15 and negative 3 would add up to 12. Okay, so that means if I put plus 15 and minus 3 in my parentheses, that would factor. So remember, what this means is if I multiply these two together, it would just go back to that. These two are equivalent. They're the same thing. Okay, just written differently because this version can give us the answer. This goes all the way back to last Monday, a week ago, so hopefully you recall, but basically when you have it set up like this, you can say what x value would make this factor 0, this parentheses 0, or what x value would make this 0 would ultimately give you that 0. So what x value could I plug in that would make x plus 15 equal 0? The answer to that is negative 15. It's just the opposite. Okay, what x value over here? If it's minus 3, it would be positive 3. Alright, so those two would do it for us. Then that would be the answer. Okay, we could have got on this one. We could have got the same answer using quadratic formula. Probably would have been about as hard, about the same maybe. I don't. It just depends. If you're good at factoring, this one obviously would have been easier, but. The directions also say describe your solution. So our solutions, it's kind of like the 1 through 4 thing we had earlier. We got 2 normal answers, which they called 2 rational answers, and they don't. they don't want us to put two rational answers because it's obvious there's two, I guess. So they just want us to put it's rational. All right. Two normal answers, that's rational. If you got a like square root in your answer, that would be irrational. And if you got a negative, well, if you got a negative inside the square root when you're working this out, that doesn't make sense. It's called not real. So those are kind of our three options. It's rational, normal answer, square root, irrational answer, and then a negative under the square root kind of blows everything up, and that's called not real. So that part's kind of new for today. I mean, we've talked about negative square roots being not real before, but all right, number 17. Let's jump in there. Okay, that was 15. All right, a squared plus 3a equals negative 1. Okay, we got a problem here. They didn't put everything on one side, so I'm going to move that minus 1 over by adding 1. So it's just a squared plus 3a plus 1 equals 0. This is the third time we've looked at this trick today. And does that factor? No. 1 times 1, you can't add that. 1 plus 1 is not 3. It doesn't factor. You can't take the square root of both sides because there's no way to get the a squared by itself because you still have an a. Okay, you need to be able to, if it just said a squared plus 1, we could get a squared by itself and square root. But if it's got this 3a over here, it's not going to work. Okay, you can't isolate the a's and its squares, and it just doesn't work. So it's either factorable or not. And it's not, so we have to use quadratic formula. So here we go, negative b. So what's our a, b, and c? 1, 3, 1. So negative b, I'm reading off of this as we go, okay? That's quadratic formula. Negative b would be negative 3 plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2 times a. All right, start under the square root. 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 1. 9 minus 4 is 5. And on the bottom we have 2 times 1 is 2. So it's negative 3. All right, this is actually all we can do. 3 plus square root of 5, that doesn't work. It doesn't, unless you want to change everything to a decimal and make it messy, it doesn't work. Square root of 5, there is no square root. I mean, there's nothing we can do on this one. So this is the final answer, okay? What kind of answer is that? That's when it has a square root that doesn't simplify it, it's called irrational. So I'll just write over here. So those would be our two answers for that one, right there. All right. It's basically what we did on Wednesday. Okay, number 19. All right, we got the same problem here that we did last time. I want to do one of each, but they're not letting me. Okay, so looks like the square root on both sides trick is not going to work because there's no just x squared on these problems or just a squared or whatever. There's always like a squared plus a like this problem. So we're not going to be able to use that trick, so I guess. So 19, we're just going to use quadratic formula again. Sorry. All right. Says 2x squared minus 7x plus 2. So A, B, C. All right, here we go. Jumping in. Negative B. Negative 7 is positive 7. Plus or minus square root of, I'm just reading off that. B squared. Negative 7 squared. Negative 7 times negative 7 is positive 49. Minus 4 times A times C. 4 times 2 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. Over 2 times A. 2 times A, 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, 49 minus 16 is 33. All right. Does 33 have a square root? No. Does 33, can we simplify it? Does it have a double? If we did the tree thing, does it break down with the double? No. 33 is 3 times 11. Okay, those are that's all we can do. Those are primes, it stops. So, kind of good news, really. So that means that's all we can do. That's the answer. Remember, they also want you to say it's irrational. So I'll write that. The end. Okay, we're done with that section. Last one. Last section, I should say. Okay, this is number 21. All right. It says, write a quadratic equation in standard form with the given solutions. Okay. Yeah. What are they talking about? 21 says x equals negative 8 and 4. All right. They're saying they found an answer to a quadratic equation. Like, they found the answer. They want us to work backwards and find an equation that answer would come from. Okay, it's the opposite of solving. It's kind of like they solved and we got to work it back up. So what we're going to do is kind of reverse the process of the factoring method. Okay? So I'm trying to think of how much I want to go into this here, but let's see. Should I do? Yeah, okay. Let's do a real quick example. 4 times 2 is 8. Let's do 2x minus b. Alright, if I were to solve this by using factoring, I would do this trick we did a couple problems ago. What goes in front? What goes in x squared is x and x. What goes in back? What goes in negative 8? That adds up to 2. 4 times 2 is 8. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. But if I make it positive 4 times negative 2, those would add up to 2. So it's positive 4, negative 2. So therefore my answers are, what makes this 0? Negative 4 and positive 2. Okay, this is not this problem. Sorry if I confused you, but this is an example. So if we reverse this process, if negative 4 is an answer, I could say that x plus 4 is a factor. If positive 2 is an answer, I could say x minus 2 is a factor. So this is an equation that would have these two answers. Okay, if I want to make it into standard form, I would just FOIL these two together and then I'd be done. So FOIL x times x, outside x times negative 2, inside 4 times x, last 4 times negative 2. Add my middle terms together, negative 2x plus 4x. Okay, That's the equation. That would be the equation that has this for solutions, which is exactly what we started with. Okay, so on this problem, we're starting with the answers like this right here, and we're working our way down to find the equation that would have those answers. All right, so it's not hard. I'm a little concerned that they only gave us 4, because that means we're gonna almost immediately forget what we did, but okay, so if -8 is an answer, x plus 8 is going to be a factor. If 4 is an answer, x minus 4 is a factor. So I'm just doing the opposite. -8, x plus 8. Positive 4, x minus 4. And then I just FOIL this together, and then that's it. That's my equation. Okay, I'll go ahead and do it. So x times x is x squared. Outside, x times -4. Inside, 8 times x. Last, 8 times -4. Add my middle two terms together. -4x plus 8x is positive 4x. And then that would be my answer for 21. All right, unfortunately 21 has a little tricks, or 22 rather, has a little trick, so we're gonna have to talk about it a little bit. I'm not gonna give you the answer, but I'll help you set it up. This is the answer in 21, that's it. The weird thing on number 22 is it says x equals 0 in 5. So 0 is weird. If I use the same tricks, okay, if 5 is an answer, x minus 5 would have to be a factor. If 0 is an answer, x minus 0 is a factor. You could write that out, like put x minus 0 in parentheses and FOIL, and you'd still get the right answer. But really, x minus 0 is just x. So doesn't really matter which side I put the x on, but this is how you would set it up if 0 is one of the answers. So you could write x minus 0 in parentheses, but you don't need to. It's a little more confusing. So just call that x. Use the distributive property, and then that would be your answer. It looks a little different than the other problems. Okay, that's it. Well, that's not the answer. That's how you do it. Number 23. Almost there. 23. X equals 1/2 and 3/4. These last two are tricky because this goes all the way back to Monday from last week, and we only did like a few of these problems. I don't remember how many, but there weren't many. I do remember that. So you probably forgot how we did it. So when you go to do 24, you're just gonna have to pay really close attention to this one and work it out. All right. Maybe I'll do an example, I guess, of something we did last week. Let me do something real quick. Whoops. What am I doing? Whoops. No, that's okay. All right. I was just making up some numbers here. Just made up a problem. This is from last week. If we get it factored out and it's in this form, what would the answers be? Okay, it's going to be positive 4/3. That was the trick from last week. So if that wasn't there, one of the answers would have been positive 4. But if you put a number in front of the x, it's going to be positive 4/3. Okay, little trick, kind of hard to remember, I guess. 4/3. Okay, over here the answer, if the 2 wasn't there, the answer would have been -1. So now the answer is -1/2, -1/2. Okay, so what we have to do is kind of reverse this. When we get fractions, we're going to reverse that process. So if 1/2 is one of our answers, it's going to look a lot like this one. Anyway, let's see if we can do it. 23. Okay, I don't know if you recall, but the denominator was basically the number in front of the x. The numerator was the number after, but it was always opposite. When you do that parentheses trick, it always makes it opposite. So to start out, it would be 2x minus 1. Okay, that would give you the answer of 1/2. And for the second one, it would be 4x minus 3. Okay, and that is it. I mean, it's not hard, but if you haven't done it a lot of times, I guess it is hard at the beginning. So all I did was, just find the pattern there. 2 went there, 1 went there, but I switched it from +1 to -1. 4 went in front, 3 went in back. Okay. FOIL. That's not new. That's very old for us. 2x times 4x is 8x squared. 2x times -3. -1 times 4x. -1 times -3. +3. Okay, put our middle terms together. Alright, the end. That's 23, the last odd. 24 is very similar. So that is all for today. Good luck.